Hi, I'm Athena Matilsky, and you're listening to Catholic versus Jew.
So just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you believe, and how you came to believe it.
Okay, so I was born to hippie parents who lived in the city but kind of like the country. And we were in New Jersey in the U.S. for most of my life. Both of my parents are culturally Jewish, and they had been both raised Jewish as well. And for us, Jewish is like an identity. And I mean, here I'm speaking for my family, not for all Jews. But for us, it wasn't so much that we were Jewish, so we had to celebrate certain holidays. It was just that that's what we identified as. And my parents even more so, because they were growing up at a time when Jews were discriminated against, and especially my grandparents, they were discriminated. So they had to come together as a community in a way that for my generation, it wasn't as necessary. So by the time it got to me, my parents had both fallen away from it a little bit. My dad really enjoyed studying Buddhism and Zen Taoism and stuff like that. And my mom she researched pagan faiths and that kind of thing, and then she came back to Judaism, but she sort of added her own twist. And so growing up, she wrote our Passover Seders, and they were a little bit more liberal, a little bit more feminist, a little bit more inclusive. So it wasn't about, just the men going off to temple and leaving the women at home, because in Judaism, gender roles are very highly defined. So I grew up with this sort of alternative Judaism, and my dad's into Zen Buddhism, and I'm taking yoga classes with my mom, and there's a bunch of hippies who celebrate solstice, and that was my childhood. And so growing up, I don't think I ever felt like there was a human God out there, like in human form. Like I never visualized a God as a person, as an entity. But I always felt like there was something greater. Like I had great fascination and awe for the natural universe. And I really was interested in good and bad and philosophy. And fast forward, I spent 5 years married to somebody who's culturally Hindu. And we found a lot of similarities, actually, between the way that he had been raised Hindu and I had been raised Jewish, as relating more to culture than to religion, and that our ideas of right and wrong actually meshed really well. And it's been interesting more recently, because now I'm dating an atheist. And I actually think we're a little bit more opposed in terms of how we... Actually, I don't know. I have never considered myself to be an atheist. I have always thought that there was something out there greater than myself, and something in the realm of mystical, spiritual, magical. And I never really identified with the Jewish God growing up. I was more drawn to nature and the things that I would read about Native Americans, and how they related to nature, and they were able to tolerate certain conditions and just feel connected to animals and the world in a way that we are often disconnected. That always intrigued me. And then from the time I was maybe 10 years old, I would take yoga classes. And so yoga was always a part of my life. And then when I got to be in my 20s, and especially after I was introduced to the Bengali and Hindu faith and culture, yoga became more important. And I ended up deciding to do a yoga teacher training just for myself. And there was a philosophical component where they would talk about energy flow and connection with the universe and awareness, and there was meditation. And I feel like when I'm doing that, I don't call it God, but I feel like I'm connecting with the greater universe, with something that's bigger than us and that connects us. And the meditation has a lot of purposes for me. Part of it is because I feel like I'm missing something. And it fills a little bit of that need, spiritually speaking, I think, and it calms me. And now that I've developed it into a daily practice, which has taken me years, I've never been able to maintain more than 3 or 4 days at a time. And it has become day after day after day now.
What time of the day?
Usually in the morning, but sometimes it'll be in the afternoon.
One session?
At least one. I find myself recently, especially if I'm feeling rattled, I'll meditate later in the day as well and sort of center myself. And I'm finding it easier and easier to tap into this greater calm and wiser piece of me that is the part that I think connects to something that's greater out there. And I imagine that that's what religious people get out of prayer. I would think that it's a similar feeling. I don't know. But for me, that never came from repeating Hebrew prayers. I never felt that. In fact, when I was included in the Hindu celebrations, I actually felt it a little bit more, which made me feel a little bit guilty because I wasn't raised that way. But I actually felt a connection to the Hindu rituals, and I think it was just because they were so old. It wasn't about my head, it was about my heart. And for me, it's important for me to get out of my head and into my heart. And the way that you were just doing this ancient traditional thing drew me in to the Hindu religion.
So what do you think the end goal is for you as a living being? The purpose?
So the question is, what do I think my purpose is, my end goal? And honestly, I don't know. I guess my best guess is that my purpose, my end goal, is to live life to the fullest, to experience everything that I can, to appreciate each moment to the best of my abilities, because it feels like an amazing gift that I may only get once.
What do you say to the person that says, hey, I figured out a way to maximize my pleasure, and it just so happens that sometimes that involves harming others? What do you say to that person?
I'm not cool with that.
So there's more to your purpose in life than just deriving the maximum amount of pleasure.
Yes. Because this is another aspect to what I believe, and I couldn't defend it if you asked me to, prove it. I couldn't. But I think that we get what we give out in this world. I think that we project a certain kind of energy, and that's what we get in return. So if you go through your whole day not smiling, then you're going to have that surrounding you, and people are going to give that to you back. And so if you're telling me you figured out a way to have fun all the time, but you're harming other people, I guess I would judge that type of fun. And I guess I would maybe think that it's a little bit false, and that it's not allowing you to get to your deeper self. It's surface, because I think that if you were to go deeper, then you would not be able to derive joy from other people's suffering.
What about love? How does love play into your worldview?
I guess love is an intense connection between people. And we seem to operate better when we're connected to other people. And I don't know if it's just because we evolved that way, because society was evolutionarily beneficial, or why. But I think that love brings us together to function as a society peripherally, and then in our family units and with our close communities, then it forms a sense of safety and security in some instances as well.
Do you believe that love is natural or that it's supernatural?
I don't know. I'm not certain that I understand the difference between the supernatural and the natural, but what it comes to mind is recently somebody told me about a study where they talked to plants. And so one of the plants, people all day long had something that said, be nice. And so people would go by and they say, oh, you're looking so beautiful today, flower. How are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And then the other plant had a sign that said, be mean. And people would insult the plant. And there was literally a visible difference between the health of the two plants. So that seems like some kind of scientific investigation into the idea of love. But I do think that there are some things that are unexplained, but I don't know that that's beyond the reach of science. I think that there are things that are beyond the reach of science yet. So just because something is explained and unexplainable now doesn't necessarily mean that it's supernatural in my view.
Super just means above. So if it's above the natural, it's necessarily higher. And it seems to me that you're hungering and thirsting for something higher. You mentioned even your higher self that's connecting with the cosmos or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's just semantics at this point. Yeah, I absolutely believe in connecting with something greater than what is immediately tangible. Absolutely. But I don't know that means that it's supernatural or beyond the explanation of science. But I don't know because I haven't thought about it.
The other notion that's connected to you and your worldview, because it sort of has an Eastern leaning that segues really nicely, is the idea of pantheism, where God is the sum total of the universe and everything in life and everything that is. That is a central teaching of the East. So are you sympathetic to that philosophical point of view?
Yes, I'm sympathetic to the pantheistic worldview. And I was actually thinking about that the other day because I did a break fast for Ramadan with a colleague, which is very interesting. I'd never done that before. and they're a Moroccan household, and I asked them why they do Ramadan. Like, why would they voluntarily fast every single day for a month while the rest of the world's still eating? And if you live in the United States, then Ramadan isn't a thing for most Americans. So you're going to be going through your day watching people eat and, in my mind, suffering. And they said something, I think that for them, they didn't give me a very specific answer, and I think they're culturally Muslim, like I'm culturally Jewish, and my ex-husband was culturally Hindu, but they did say, there's something in the Quran that says, God said, look at how much I did for you, this is how I want you to give back, was through Ramadan. And I was thinking about that, just because it is very different. I think it is opposed to my feeling, because I keep feeling like the closer I can tap into this wiser, more centered, more grounded part of myself, that's my connection to a greater universe that connects us all. And so it feels more connected, whereas that description of Islam, God is separate. It's very separate from the subject, who would be the Muslim person themselves. And that's how it is in Judaism, and that's how it is in Christianity.
Not so much. No. The Eastern point of view with the Hindus and the Buddhists believe that God is immanent, but not transcendent. The Muslims believe that he's transcendent, but not immanent. And the Christians believe that he's both transcendent and immanent. Okay? So he's everywhere. God sustains every single quark and electron in the entire universe. God's powering everything, just like the Eastern religions teach. And yet he is sovereign, he is unique, he is separate from his world also. He is above the world, like the Muslims teach. So Christianity bridges that gap. I'm not giving a sales pitch,
No, I'm listening.
Just speaking from my perspective.
No, I think maybe I made a face because you kept saying he. That was probably the only thing that bothered me in the whole thing. I'm fine with you explaining.
Yeah, there is a philosophical justification for referring to God as he, even though he transcends sex. It's because he's pure actuality, there's no potential in God. So the human soul is denoted as being feminine with respect to God because we're passively receiving. So God is the bridegroom and we are the bride, and it's all about that, fulfilling that and consummating that marriage. And so it's very, very romantic. It's all about love and marriage and sex, okay? And family and unity.
Well, yeah, no, that was the whole idea, was to bring people together with order and rules. I think it's more about, how do we create structure to a family unit and define things so that we can pay taxes? As far as I know, Christianity is well linked to that.
Yeah, let's, instead of speaking in the abstract, because you have a Catholic in front of you, let's see if you can find a way where I am being controlled by the Catholic Church, because I've never felt a heavy hand from God or a heavy hand from the Church. I've only received support and love from
Fair
God
enough.
and from the Church. And I've never met a faithful Catholic who submits to the Church, who feels oppressed by the Church. It's the rebels who feel oppressed, right? It's the rebels who want to sin. They're the ones who feel
people who feel not
repressed.
protected by the Church and who feel unsafe. Because you meet people who are, for example, who are homosexual, who are very conflicted because they grew up with the Catholic Church and they feel an affinity. And I'm not questioning your feeling of, love and safety, but yeah, okay, so anybody who rebels, so that means that there are certain people who are not able to find that solace.
It's a question of the will. There are two different kinds of Catholic homosexuals. One is repentant and one is unrepentant. So the repentant one is partaking of the sacraments and he's striving to be chaste and to control his lust. And the other one believes that his lust is good and that pleasure is good no matter what, and that what two consenting adults do is fine. Men, women, whatever. Okay? So those are two different kinds of Catholic homosexuals. One is obeying the Church and submitting to the Church and struggling with these desires that he has and with the impulses that he has, and the other is raising himself above the Church and teaching the Church and saying the Church is wrong. So I would say from my Catholic perspective that one would feel a bad kind of tension and a kind of guilt and a kind of oppression. and a kind of control from the church, whereas the other one, the faithful one, the one that's striving to be chaste, is free, truly free.
I would pose that he feels more tension and stress and difficulty and self-doubt and fear than the other person. I don't believe that that's freedom, because you're fighting a piece of who you are. And I would imagine that to be devastating for the person who has to do that.
If you know who you're submitting to, and you know how good God is, and how loving and how generous, and how small the sexual pleasure that you're giving up is, it's just like your Muslim friends that were fasting. If they are faithful to God and they know who God is and what awaits them in heaven, the fleeting pleasures of this world are easy to give up.
It's not the sex that I'm talking about. I mean, I'm sure that there can be homosexual and heterosexual people out there who don't have sex. That's not the issue. It's that you have to deny a piece of your own identity, a piece of who you are, and that goes much far beyond denying yourself simple pleasures. Because being homosexual is not just about who you want to have sex with. It's about your entire perspective, your worldview, your identity, and that's being posed as wrong by the Catholic Church, and that makes people feel terrible.
Well, it's not wrong to be a homosexual, just like it's not wrong to be a thief. It's just acting on that predisposition that's wrong. So the thief, I'm by nature a thief. I entered the church and I said I can't be a thief anymore. So is that a source of freedom or a source of oppression to me? To me, it's a sense of
So you're
freedom.
saying that being homosexual is like being a thief?
Yeah, or being an adulterer, or
By being an adulterer, you're hurting somebody. Or by being a thief, you're hurting somebody. Who are you hurting by being a homosexual?
yourself, your partner, your society
In
generally.
what way?
The analogy that I like to use is if you have a screw and you have the choice between a screwdriver and a hammer, you can use the hammer to put the screw into the wood. But that's not what the screw is designed for, and that's not what the hammer was designed for. The screw was made for the screwdriver, and the screwdriver was made for the screw, and it's just the nature of those tools corresponds to reality. So it's not ideal, it doesn't correspond to reality, it's disordered, it's objectively disordered. And what we are designed for, and what sex is designed for, is to have the openness to life, and to have that unitive, loving aspect too. But you can't remove the loving aspect and just have prostitution, and you can't remove the procreative openness to life and just have the animalistic pleasure without the openness to life. You need both components. This is the teaching of the church. And so that's why not only homosexual acts are wrong, but all aberrant sexual behavior, even masturbation, is wrong. You might ask, well, who does it hurt? No one sees you. You're in private in your dark room and the curtains are drawn. Who are you hurting? Well, I would argue you're hurting yourself, you're hurting your family, you're hurting your spouse, you're hurting your society at large. That's what I believe.
I firmly disagree that homosexuality is in the same category as people doing wrong, and I firmly disagree that sexuality, the what you're classifying as abuse of sexuality or the misuse of it, I don't agree with that, and I also don't agree with the stuff that you were saying about being disordered, because you look through nature just does its thing. Like, there are examples of homosexuality in nature, and sex isn't just for procreation, it's about connectivity and orgasm.
I just said that with the unitive function of sex and the procreation.
No, but you said if I go to the bathroom or to the bedroom and I masturbate, then that's wrong. Well, if it puts me in an amazing mood and now I'm nicer to my boyfriend when he comes home from work, how is that a bad thing?
There are people that have really sick inclinations and they feel better. There's a certain euphoria that comes after they engage in it. For example, chopping up humans and eating their flesh. Their mood improves when they do that.
Right, but that's an argument about when is euphoria better than other euphoria, but that has nothing to do with...
No, but you're arguing that if it makes you feel better and put you in a better mood, then it's objectively good, but I disagree.
Then why did you eat potato chips earlier? Like, you were eating potato chips that did no good to the universe. It's not serving God. It's not even serving your own body, because the oils and the potatoes themselves are not doing your body. So why do you eat potato chips?
It's part of my rainbow diet.
Yeah, no, honestly, I think that if we're going to go that way, if I can't masturbate, you can't eat potato chips.
Let's make a deal. No more potato.
No, I'm not going to shake to that.
I would gladly give up potato chips for you.
And I would give up masturbation if there were a real reason, but I don't see that as being against nature. And if you look in nature, you see animals seeking pleasure, you see plants wanting pleasure. What's wrong with pleasure as long as it's not hurting anyone?
Pleasure's good, yeah. Pleasure is good as long as it's not hurting anyone.
Right, so I just don't understand the hurting anyone part.
Yeah, many people don't understand the sexual moral teachings of the Catholic Church, but I do want to address something you said. I don't believe that it's wrong to be homosexual or to be a thief, like I said earlier. And the other thing was that sexuality is not just for procreation. So I just want to be very clear about that, because those are straw man arguments that are put up against the Catholic Church.
No.
It's oversimplifying sexual morality as taught by the Catholic Church.
And and that's fine. That's not what I'm arguing against. I'm uncomfortable with the treatment of homosexuals in the Catholic Church and the trauma and suffering that they are put through because other people don't like what they do, and I don't think it's those other people's business.
What does the Catholic Church teach about how we should treat homosexuals?
They are ostracized from the community.
So you think the church teaches we should ostracize homosexuals? Is that what
I don't know what the church teaches.
Well, you don't know, exactly.
But I
know.
see the results.
No, but I know what the church teaches, right?
So anybody who is a Catholic but mistreats a homosexual is wrong, is what you're saying. Okay, good. I agree with that.
Yeah, you can't judge the teachings of the Catholic Church if you don't know what they are. You can't just assume...
But when the church says that something is wrong, and the church is a leader that people look up to, and so if they say that somebody's lifestyle is wrong, it's evil, if you're going to be a leader, if you're going to have people looking up to you, then you better make sure that you are encouraging people to love each other. And by saying that somebody's nature is wrong... And that's what, because I do believe that it's in their nature, and you probably don't. I'm not, or maybe you do, I don't know. But when you classify somebody's identity as wrong, then you are encouraging violence. You are encouraging people to not love each other, people to ostracize each other.
I strongly disagree, because the church clearly teaches that we have to love not only the friendly neighborhood homosexuals, we have to love our enemies. I mean, there is no one that we're allowed to not love.
But in the same breath, it says that homosexuality is evil.
Just like it says that masturbation is evil.
Right, and I think that both of those things are wrong because they're not harming other people.
You're entitled to your opinion, and you're probably in the majority today, given the fact that most so-called practicing Catholics don't actually believe all the teachings of the Catholic Church, particularly when it comes to things like masturbation and birth control. And that, to me, is a problem. I'd like to see people accept the teaching, and if you struggle to implement the teaching, that's fine, that's normal. That's normal to struggle and to fail and to fall. That's why we have confession.
I don't agree with your particular worldview.
Yeah, if you did, you would be Catholic.
Yeah.
What do you think about death? Do you think about death every day?
I think about my own death frequently.
And what are you hoping for? What are you afraid of?
I hope that, looking back, hopefully I'm able to live a long time. I don't know. But whenever, if I were to die tomorrow or if I die in 40 years, I hope that I'm proud of what I've done. That I have lived life to the fullest and in some ways contributed to society. I think of myself as a kind person, and I've always tried to, even as a kid, if somebody was being bullied, then I would side with the bully and I would speak up.
You would side with the bully?
Sorry, not with the bully, with the person who's... Yeah, I'm a good person because I harass people. No, I apologize. This is what happens when I have two thoughts in my head.
You side with the victim.
So I would side with the victim, and I would confront, even in moments... I told you earlier that, this conversation was a little bit intense. But when I have to confront somebody and say, I think what you're doing is wrong, I do it. Where sometimes other people won't speak up. Or if I think somebody's being unfairly treated, then I speak up, which is actually, that's why I got so intense earlier. And when I was in college, I volunteered for the domestic violence response team, and I went through a whole bunch of hours of training. I did a lot of volunteer work in college, but the biggest thing was the work that I did for victims of domestic violence and rape. And then I lived in Honduras for a year where I was a volunteer in a bilingual school, so teaching kids 6th grade for a year in kind of difficult conditions. And the whole point of having American volunteers there was that they could give them scholarships and that kind of thing. So it's a non-profit school that's giving kids in Honduras a better shot at life, which they deserve because conditions there are pretty horrible because of the lack of birth control. Teenagers are getting pregnant all the time. Like, they're not taught about sex. They're not taught about birth control. So they just don't know. So girls at a very young age are getting pregnant, and then there's so many young single mothers, and then the girls will get beaten because sexuality is a sin. But then eventually they now have another mouth to feed, and because they don't have birth control, they're constantly having kids. And there's no infrastructure, so the men can't get jobs, and many of them are alcoholics. And it's a very difficult situation that has like lots of historical roots or whatever. But for 1 year, I was there helping some kids to have a better chance. And one of my proudest things was the fact that I did teach the kids about birth control and sexuality and what was happening to their bodies, and, that certain things were not to be ashamed of. And both girls and boys learning about each other's bodies so that they understand that as well, so they don't grow up ignorant. And I was really proud of the work that I did there. And then when I came back to the United States, I started working again in domestic violence, and I couldn't take it, actually. So I'm not necessarily proud of that, but that environment was really difficult to work in. So I left there. But even now, like, I'm raising money for kids to go to high school in Honduras. I try to donate to certain causes, and I just try to live a life that I can feel is a good one.
Obviously, I believe in two extreme outcomes, heaven or hell. And you're going to end up in one or the other, ultimately. So, do you have different outcomes, or does everyone end up in exactly the same situation, whether it's good, bad, or neutral? Is there any difference between the best case scenario and the worst case scenario after death for any human?
I don't presume to know what happens after we die. I guess the most romantic and possibly logical explanation that I would have is that we sort of melt back into the universe from whence we came. And in that case, yeah, the murderer will end up with the same future outcome as the saint. Yeah.
Doesn't do a lot to uphold morality.
No, it doesn't.
So why do you do the right thing and not the wrong thing? Or why do you strive to be good and not evil? Selfless and not selfish?
I don't know why I choose to be good instead of evil, and it's funny because I can't justify it. I don't know whether it's societal and familial, like I was raised that way, I was told I should be kind to other people, and that's why I think it's so important. But I do think that there's something, and maybe this connects back to what we were talking about all the way at the beginning, where I feel like there's something out there. I feel like there's something bigger than myself. I am happiest when I am proud of myself, when I feel I have been good, and that's maybe selfish too, because if you're deriving satisfaction from being a good person, then perhaps your ends are not the right ones. I don't know. But I believe that I should be good, and I can't really tell you why.
Why should other people be good?
Because I don't want them to be bad to me. and I mean, essentially, at the end, if we look at life as this gift that we've been giving, then why shouldn't as many of us enjoy it as possible?
Yeah. So at the end of my interviews, I always just ask my guests to talk to the audience, just to give a little message of hope from your perspective, because everyone has a different perspective. Just in a very general terms, what could you say to someone that might be out there listening now?
I think I would just say that I truly believe that everybody has spark within them, has potential, and has beauty and has greatness. And that if you just take a moment to breathe and to love yourself and to allow yourself to exist however imperfect you may be, then you'll be that much closer to feeling at ease with the world around you.
If you like your worldview, if you think it's swell, if you've got some questions, ask me and I'll tell. All you got to do is ask. All you got to do is